this. Okay, so welcome everybody. Frank, can you kick off as usual and say a few words about the program and why we're doing this?
Okay, thanks very much indeed, Jimson. I'm looking forward to your world-class conducting of this orchestra over the next hour and a half. You've done a fantastic job, mate, every day, every night this week. And my thanks in advance, of course, to Giacomo, who organized the entire thing. Thanks also to the wonderful panelists that we've got in front of us right now. And huge welcome to not only to the people who've been here before, but the ones who are arriving for the first time. Now, apologies if some of this is repetitive, but just let me give you a bit of context as to why we're all here. First of all, this is a virtual, a European Athletics Coaches Association virtual coaches club. Now, where did that come from? Well, first of all, the Global Athletics Coaching Academy decided that one of their big aims in life was to bring coaches together when we were at major championships. And so we've asked World Athletics that at every major championships in future, those countries who are bidding for the contract must make available a facility for coaches like ourselves who are there, accredited or not, to join together, to have a meeting place, to network, to learn together in real time. But once that was started, we had the idea, well, why does that only apply to World Athletics? Why should we not be doing that at area level? And so I'll be speaking to the areas around the world, asking them if they will please consider that too. Well, the world we're in right now, of course, the very fact that we're actually communicating like this, thanks, if you think about it, one of the, COVID was a desperate thing to happen to this planet. But one of the good bits that came out of it was we've learned to communicate virtually far more readily than we used to do in the past. And so why couldn't we have the notion of a virtual coaches club? Now, it started off with Oceania. They decided to have three panels brought together at different points throughout the Olympic Games. I suggested it to Giacomo. He came up with the idea of every night. And so it's gone on all the way around the world. Even Gunther will be pleased to understand, to hear, even in Asia, where three of the regions are actually putting together their own coaches clubs, virtual coaches clubs throughout the games. So it's caught on, it's on fire. And you can see what's happened here. We've got over 500 people now registered for this. What's the value of that? Well, one of our big aims we had 4 big aims for the Global Athletics Coaching Academy. That is to reshape education, to reshape regulation, how coaches are supported and how they are represented. Your voice is being heard through this particular vehicle. Everything is recorded, and there will be recommendations at the end of this that you hopefully will be putting forward that we can put back to World Athletics about how we can reach the world of the future. So that's the background, folks. We've got a fantastic hour and a half ahead of us, led with our superstar, Jimson Lee.
Great, thanks again, Frank, as always. And as you all know, I'm with speedendurance.com. I post some opinions as well, and some of the videos are up there, so please check that out. So let's get started. We got 10 events to talk about. So let's start with the first one, the 400-meter hurdles. And for this one, I want to call on Rita Engelbrecht. She's a world authority, high performance in both short and long hurdles, and formerly South Africa head hurdles coach and coached Olympic hurdles and mentor to coaches for Olympic and world athletes. Rita, welcome back again. I know you have a lot to talk about women's 400. What can you say about that?
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. I think that it is so incredible, as I said last night, is that the exceptional is now becoming the normal. And I was thinking about it that in the 400-meter hurdles, men and women, we have our own Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic. I mean, these 3 people that win the medals are just at the same level as those people. I must say that I'm not going to go over the details of the times and things like that. We know that that a 51.46 and a 51.55, those time 56 are just incredible times, in that nobody has thought. I mean, there are girls that are running in the 400 meters that is not beating those times at the Olympics at present. So it is an incredible achievement. What I would like to say, and then I would like to make one comparison, is that I did think that Delilah, this stage, roundabout hurdle 8, hurdle 9, that she is, as far as I'm concerned, she still has more and better. She's just faster over the hurdles than Sydney. Although Sydney has improved her technique tremendously, 100-meter hurdles, she is just faster. I mean, if you look at her over the first 5-6 hurdles, it doesn't look like she's hurdling. She is just like stepping over those hurdles in a stride, and she fits in so perfectly between the hurdles. It's like amazing. Nothing would take nothing away from Sydney. She does exactly the same. I read what Delilah said afterwards, is that she trusted her, she trusts her preparation, her coach, her whole approach towards the race. But if it was me, I most probably would have let her start it a tiny bit slower so that the lactic acid buildup, she runs at such a tremendous speed. Maybe just those 3-4 strides where she was overtaken, and maybe it was also on the last hurdle where Sydney just took that hurdle with her strength a little bit better. And maybe it's the 10-11 years difference in age that also, it's the youth coming through and that strong will. But what a tremendous race. And I think, take nothing away from the young Femke Bol from the Netherlands. I mean, to run 52 at this stage in her life, I would like to see her technique improving, because I think if one thing that we can see from the hurdles, the 400-meter hurdles nowadays, is that the technique of the athletes, the superior athletes, bring their time down, and those are the ones that are winning. I mean, we could see it clearly with Sydney, that ran the 100 hurdles, good preparation, good mental preparation, coming down to a 12.74 and running far more superior over the hurdles. So I think that's a very important thing to remember. Of course, a lot of people say that Delilah was in lane 6 and Sydney in lane 4, and she could watch her all the time. I don't think that it played such a major role. Delilah always starts and she runs her own race. She runs fast regardless of what. So for me, that at that level, complaining about lanes or whatever, she didn't complain. She's the most wonderful smiling person. She never complains in any case. I would like to make, maybe as a last little bit, a comparison between the 400 hurdles, the hurdlers, and the 400-meter men and women. And I think if I have to compare them, I would compare Varel to Delilah. They're the same type of sprint athletes, more superior technique. And I would compare Sydney to Benjamin, although I must say that Sydney's technique, you cannot compare. I think that is where the American and the 400-meter hurdles men can really improve on. He's a tall guy, but his technique, as far as I'm concerned, maybe cost him a little bit over the hurdles. But that where she gets that last 20-30 meters strength in her legs, just like Varholm, it is amazing. They are special people. They are coached by people that brings out the best in them, and that is absolutely amazing. But I think as coaches, we just have to learn that 400 hurdles is not about your 400 runner that can't run fast enough and put them over the hurdles and they run and do well. A 400 hurdler is a hurdler first, then a runner. And that is my piece on the 400-meter hurdles.
Okay, thank you for that. So there's a question in the chat actually from Pablo Sanchez. Is the improvements and performance, is it technique or strength that is making the big difference in all 6 runners? Technique or strength?
Which one? I think I wouldn't say that technique or strength, which one is that? I think that all of them are parts of the components, and you can, as your strength improves, your technique will improve. The two goes hand in hand, and I think that that That's why I've always had the philosophy, sprinters can't coach hurdlers, but hurdlers can coach, hurdles coaches can coach, and hurdles is your priority. And I think the strength and the technique, in my opinion, goes hand in hand with all the other components of the program. It is not the one or the other. They go hand in hand.
Okay, anybody else want to chime in on that? Anybody else? Fascinating. Anybody? Okay.
Oh, great insight. Great insight.
Yeah, great insight, Rita. Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to the next event. And I'm going to choose the coaches who are actually in Tokyo because it's, again, 2 o'clock in the morning. So on this one, I want to talk about the women's steeplechase. And I want to call on Gunter. Gunter, as we all know, was here a few days ago. He's the world leader in endurance events, coaching, and high performance strategic planning. Now he's a Ugandan special presidential assistant in education and sport. So Gunter, welcome back. As we know, Uganda won the gold medal in steeplechase. Peru's Chemutai won the gold. People thought Emma Coburn was going to win it, but you know, this is the Olympics. Gunter, what are your thoughts on tonight's steeplechase? And you're on mute.
Thank you, Jimson, for the warm welcome. And first of all, I want to apologize that I couldn't attend yesterday, but I simply collapsed after having only 2 nights sleep due to attending this panel. I needed a sleep yesterday, so sorry for that. 3,000 meter steeplechase. I think it was due to 3 factors that we had this fantastic national record from Chemutai. Number 1, we had already a discussion about that she has changed and implemented the hurdling of the water jump with the advantage it brings for her and probably for others. Second, she has definitely improved since Doha her aerobic capacity. And third of all, I was surprised to learn during the last days how few teams, endurance athletes, have systematically prepared their thermoregulation adaptation. Yeah, so quite some of the teams, without naming them, I know now from inside that they did nothing to prepare the obvious expected heat. We have an environment of 30 degrees plus and 70–80% humidity. And latest since World Athletics has done the thermoregulation project in Doha, which I had the privilege to be part of, we know not only the negative impact of these situations to endurance performance, but it was also published how you can prepare your athletes. And I find it surprising that quite a lot of our running nations haven't applied it in spite of having been informed. I also was surprised about when we look at that race, we had Uganda, USA, Kenya, and then Ethiopia. I had the privilege to work with Ethiopian athlete Abebe in a training camp, which was specifically, you will love about it, for clearance of the water jump. And Abebe at that training camp was one of the best athletes at the end of the camp. But I saw in the heat that she was going back to her original, I think, less efficient technique to step on and then not really push and get some distance. When I asked the coach, what is the reason why you didn't change the technique, because she was really good at the end of the training camp, and his point was, she doesn't have the courage. You may have noticed that the Ugandan athlete had 2 situations. When she was in the beginning part of the race covered, so she couldn't see the obstacles, her technique was definitely less good than, and this was the reason, she was running from the front. So she could better anticipate the obstacle. And I think also that our American friends, beside Coburn, was already before not in the same shape like in Doha, but our American colleagues were suffering from the heat. I would like to citate the project manager from World Athletics, Dr. Bermond, who mentioned that we should be prepared for Tokyo. It will not be necessarily the fastest runner to win the endurance events, but a fast runner who is best prepared to run under those conditions. Thank you.
Great insight, Gunther. Thank you very much. Anybody want to comment on Gunther's comments? I mean, it's fantastic analysis. Any steeplechase lovers or middle distance runners?
I think it's becoming more and more specialized now, isn't it? It used to be kind of an add-on. If you weren't going to be very good at 1500 or 5000, why not try the 3000 steeplechase? But it's becoming pretty specialized now, isn't it?
I would say if we have the decathlon as one of the king events in track and field, in the running event, it is definitely not a beside event where you go when you come from 1500 or 5000. It is the event with the highest demand in performance limiting factors for your skill level. Yeah, you have the need to have a proper clearance on the obstacles under fatigue. And now we have extended the technique. So besides step on, we have a clearance model. And I'm a little bit surprised that this model was only practiced by the Ugandan athlete. I have the videos of all clearance in all heats and in the final, and that it was also in the man category, only very few. The second Kenyan runner who came in as the second runner from Kenya was practicing the clearance. So I believe that there is still positively seen a reserve for further improvement to be able to clear bilateral. I saw still too many athletes dribbling to looking for their good leg or one leg to clear. So to be able to clear whatever leg is in front, to anticipate even for shorter distance, and then according to the situation, like we mentioned already before yesterday, you step on or you clear. But I believe that we will see further world records coming, and that the actual record will be improved, but not under the conditions we find in Tokyo.
Good points. Good points. Okay, I think let's move on to the next event. Pablo mentioned.
Jimson, can I just ask a question of Gunther?
Oh, by all means.
Yeah, Gunther, first of all, great run for Uganda there, great achievement by Chemutai, and really good to see. I noticed that I think we all saw that Emma Coburn fell, but in the result, she's been given a DQ. And in the past, you used to be able to kind of hover over the DQ online and see what the infraction was, the IAAF rule number. But that facility doesn't seem to be happening anymore. Do you happen to know why she was disqualified?
I noticed that she was disqualified according to TR 17.3.2, but I have not yet managed to find out what is the cause. So 17.3.2 is the rule which was used to disqualify her. This is the protocol. So we have to look in the rules. I not yet did that.
Thanks for that. Thank you for that. And yeah, some great national records there for Canada and for Slovenia as well.
Yeah.
Slovenia, I was not surprised because we have also been cooperating with our colleagues from Slovenia, and we will see further improvement from Slovenia. This athlete is very promising, and don't be surprised, they also work on their skill level. This is the reserve. Endurance performance or endurance to improve is relatively simple, but you know that endurance coaches in general are not really prone to technique training. And that's the reason why steeple is, in my opinion, the royal event of the running events, because you need to do some serious skill development.
Great. And then Kevin Ankrum just posted what the rule 17.5.2 is on the chat, so you can read up there. Okay, let's move on to hammer throw. And for this one, I call on two panelists. One is our very own Sean Pickering, who's in Tokyo. Welcome back, Sean. I know it's 2 o'clock in the morning, very conscious of that. And the other one is Martin Bingisser, who was here yesterday. So I think everyone knows Martin from his website, Hammer Media. That's hammer without any vowels. And so Martin is a Swiss national hammer and throws coach and international strategic consultant, strength and conditioning and throws. So welcome back, both of you. Who wants to go first? Hammer throw.
Jimson, can I make a quick point before we get onto the hammer, because I know Martin and I both have a great love of hammer, but there was another thing that happened in the throws today, and I just wanted to bring it out because there's been a lot of talk about the super track and what it's doing for the sprints and how positive it is because of this particular type of Mondo track that has a closed cell on top and a hard cell underneath. There was a big impact on the men's javelin qualifying today. And I know Anders might have some thoughts on this, but the guys couldn't get a grip. They were slipping big time, and the distances were way down. And I think that's going to be something that certainly we want to talk about when the final comes around, because the forces involved in the javelin and stopping those guys, they were struggling big time. And we saw a lot of people not make it through qualifying. And this is one of the negative impacts of the super tracks that they're being developed for the sprinters and work well with the spikes where they don't go in. But it has a very negative effect on some other events, and the javelin being one of them. So I did, before we get onto the hammer, and I know Anders may have an opinion on that, but it was noticeable today, and that's something that we should bear in mind. When it comes to the hammer, I'm really pleased to see that the event is reemerging. You know, it was a very high level event, much better than even a couple of years ago. More guys over 80 meters, but particularly I was very pleased to see Arvid Eriksson from Norway come through and set a national record and get a silver medal, which was quite incredible. I happened to be sitting behind the Norwegian contingent and celebrating with them, so that was pretty good. And the both Poles did very well. Nowicki certainly looked very, very good today. Paweł Fidek, 4 times world champion, still has a problem with the Olympic Games and still puts himself under pressure in qualifying, and thought he got a silver medal, and then Ivan came past him and took that silver medal away. But I just have to say that the depth was very good. I think we missed the Americans stepping up. I thought that Rudy Winkler might step up, and he didn't quite do it, finishing down in 6th or 7th place. But Quentin Bigot from France throwing well. So it was a very good level performance, and I'm sure also Martin has some thoughts about that.
Yeah, Martin, your thoughts on the javelin first before the hammer. What do you think about the runway surface and the effects on the athletes?
I don't coach throwers that wear spikes, so I'm not as expert on the on the javelin side. So I'll defer to Sean's the feedback there. But yeah, you definitely saw some of the favorites struggle. They didn't look comfortable out there, and yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see if they can get used to it in the final, if it's something they need to really make some adjustments for, or to get used to, or if it's just going to be a complete negative impact on the results.
Yeah, it sounds like Poland's the powerhouse in hammer throws. Anybody wants to excel in hammer throws in Poland. So Sean, what do you think about, I mean, the throws is always usually traditionally a European thing in the past. Maybe it changes to the American side, but how can the hammer throw be made more globally? Like, it seems like, you know, Europeans dominate.
I think it is. No, I mean, I think, you know, we had 3 Americans up in the high 70s and over 80 meters this year. So that's, you know, quite impressive and a big step forward. Of course, there's been a great tradition in Europe, and particularly the Russian hammer school, and that's where it all came from. When it was the old Soviet Union, there were so many hundreds of hammer throwers, and they all had good technique and good models. And then now that's disseminated out, and we have things like the internet that can get people getting more information. But I think you know, when you saw today, if you look at the level of performances, Norway, no tradition in hammer throwing, getting a silver medal. France getting a 4th place, Great Britain getting a 6th place, highest for 100 years. So actually, you know, even within Europe, there are small countries that are coming through and having positive results. So 1 Russian in the final, and obviously there's only 10 Russians competing here, but Pronking wasn't throwing that well, didn't make the, you know, struggled to make the top 8. But I thought, you know, it was disappointing for me personally. Again, the Americans have been underperforming a little bit, but coming into these championships, I was expecting Rudy Winkler to throw well and throw over 80 meters and get in the mix, and they just he wasn't quite up there. But I think it is starting to, you know, we maybe need a few more African countries coming through. There hasn't been a lot happening and we saw in the women's hammer that we have athletes from New Zealand doing well, also an athlete from Belgium doing well. So, you know, it's starting to get out there, and globalization is happening, but we're missing some particular strengths. The German throwers in a number of areas, there was no German shot putter. That's quite interesting. There was no glider in the shot put. So, you know, these are very interesting things as well, as techniques change and people are observing what's going on in
I would say in Pronking,
other countries. And I think, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, you cut out there. Sorry. Yeah, Pronking, he was the 1 Russian in the final. I mean, the only Russian in the competition because they had a limitation on their team size. But, you know, he was also the only 3-turner in the field too. So a bit of an older technique. It's being phased out more and more. You know, 10, 15 years ago in the hammer, I actually think it was a bit more global because you had Koji Morifushi. You had a pretty diverse set, even on the women's side too. China also has had some good representation in the past Olympics and also this time. So I think it's this time, yeah. So I think 9 of the top 10 were European, with the exception of Rudy in 7th. It's very European affair, but as Sean was saying, it's different countries in Europe. There is a changing of the guard. It's moving away from Eastern Europe and more towards you know, Central and Western Europe, towards America. So it's been interesting to watch those dynamics change. Just on the level, I want to add a few stats. I mean, the first 5 throwers were over the winning result from Rio. You know, Rio was one of the worst Olympics we've had in the hammer throw in terms of results on the men's side in a while. And all 5 came out to, as Wolfgang was saying yesterday, almost every event. Almost every event you're getting season best, national best. You know, Nowicki threw a personal best for 1st place. Henriksson in 2nd place, he threw a national record in qualifying, and then he threw 3 more national records in the final. 5 of his 6 throws were over his old national record in the final. So you're really having these athletes step up. Quinton Bijot, I mean, he was in 5th place. You know, if I would have thought, okay, he's one of the most consistent throwers. If he can turn in 79 meters again, he's on the podium, and he slips down to 5th. So that it was really, really high level already from the first round. People were coming out strong. So it was much higher level than anticipated. And Fajek, he's always the interesting one. He is normally either great or terrible. He's 4-time world champion. So when he's on, he wins. You know, he's 2 times he didn't even make the finals of the Olympics in 2012 and 2016. So he's either on or off. And what was interesting this time is he was in that middle. He was good. He came in as the world leader. He was only a couple meters off of that, but he just didn't have that extra gear when it counted. So this is the first time he was either he was in that middle ground. So I was expecting him, especially after a very mediocre qualifying for him, I was expecting him to not be a factor, but he was able to come around in the last few rounds and at least get the bronze. So Poland, I said the powers are shifting away from Eastern Europe. Poland still won 4 of the 6 hammer throw medals. So it's still a very, Poland is on top of this the event, you know. Włodarczyk on the women's side will likely end their career. Fajek and Nowicki, I mean, they might have one more Olympics in them, but I don't think they're going to be as much of a factor in Paris. So we'll see what the succession plan is like there, but they still are on top.
Yeah, I see Rita has her hand up. Rita, comments on Javelin?
I think I would like to sort of a general observation on some of the field event finals that we've seen up till now, including today. is that I think for me, it slowly started happening over the last 2-3 years, but now all of a sudden, in the past you used to look at field athletes and they look like field athletes. Now you look at the field athletes and you wonder if they are sprinters. Their build, their physical change, even in the shot put, and there's a general, everything is faster all of a sudden. There is a speed explosion in the observing the discus, the hammer, everything is like, it's faster, like all the athletics coaches secretly decided that speed is going to be the factor that we need to develop if we want to get faster and higher and further. That is my observation. And also the fantastic physique of especially in the women, and in some of the field events, it's like amazing to see that it is happening like that.
Sean, you have your hand up.
I just think it's the natural occurrence of moving away from the drugs-filled era, from the throws, because it was all about strength, and strength came from a bottle. And now what's happening is people are starting to figure out that actually, even though the shot put is 7.26 kilos, that's not that heavy, and so speed is the important thing. And same with the discus. And so if you're not so dependent upon strength, and you have someone like Zane Weir threw very, very well in the qualifying the shot put yesterday, this half South African, half Italian guy, he's weighing 108 kilos through 21.25 with not a lot of strength, but good timing and good rhythm can get good distance. And I'm pleased to see that. And you see Valerie Ullman in the women's discus, an incredible example of that. She comes from a dance background, street dance background, and has developed that. And again, it's a 1 kilo discus. It's not that heavy. So the ability to move at speed and to get the discus moving at speed is the most important thing. So there's a lot less dependence on strength. Some areas are still very strength dependent. There's a lot of very strong guys, but even if you look at someone like Ryan Krauser in the men's shot put, incredibly powerful man, but at 2 meters, over 2 meters tall and 140 kilos, he still would take any good sprinter over the first 10-15 meters. Everyone says how fast he is over that sort of distance because that reactivity is what he works on. Even though in the circle he looks slow, but his ability to move fast when he needs to is there.
Yeah. Before we leave Javelin, I noticed we have someone on a call named Anders Borgstrom. If you can, welcome to have you chime a few words here, if you may, Anders.
Yes, I can comment on what Sean took as a topic. That's a track in Javelin. It might be very, very good for the sprinters and the runners, but obviously it's a combination of very hard track and that the very surface seems to be fragile. You could see scars on the surface, and just thinking that the load on the left leg, if you're right-handed, is about 10 times the body weight at the delivery. You must have a very, very firm grip with your blocking leg. And obviously, several of the participants had problems with that item. The other comment I can give before I give a short notice concerning the Javelin is that I have also the same observation concerning, for example, Valerie Ullman in discus throw, a very slim and very, very good balance and rhythm and very good timing in the throw. She proves that it's possible to throw very far on very good technique.
Great, thank you for that input. That's great. Okay, I think we should move on to the 200 meters here. I think we have a lot to cover. So for the sprints, I want to call on Christine Harrison-Bloomfield. She's a former Great Britain national team athlete, now high performance sprints coach, and has worked with Olympic gold medalist Christine Ohurugu. So Christine, thank you. Welcome back. And your thoughts on the men's 200? I'm wearing the Canada shirt here. This is for Andre DeGrasse. What are your thoughts on men's 200 tonight?
You know what, DeGrasse has been building, because if we look back in Rio when he won the bronze medals, here what he did is with each round he built. He didn't try to run fast, and what I found really interesting is if you look at the way he attacked the bend, he didn't come off the bend in first position. Bednark came off the bend in the first position, but he knew that if he was in touching distance of Bednark, the way he accelerates off the turn and going into the home straight is far more consistent. I think Bednark was very tight in his upper torso, whereas De Grasse was relaxed. De Grasse kept with his race plan. And as I said to you from the 100 meters, Rainer Ryder, his coach, works on these kind of technical elements, and he looks at the weaknesses of each person. Okay, Noel Lyles, he probably looked at what Noel Lyles does in the last part of the race, and he worked that in De Grasse throughout the winter season. And so his speed endurance was far more superior to, I can't pronounce his name, but Bednark, the American. But also, I want to say, the young boy, if he had started more efficiently and his reaction was better, he would have given them better competition. And I feel that his inexperience of being in the final and racing at that level impacted him achieving a medal. That's just my personal opinion. But I think you have to look back at De Grasse, and De Grasse's 100 meters, it was a PB. He ran 1973 in the semi-finals. And then to come back and run 1963, a national record. I think he was always poised to win that 200 meters.
Yeah, thank you for that. I see Peter Eriksson have your hand up. So Peter, welcome back again, one of our panelists. He's with Canada's Own the Podium program. What are your thoughts on the men's 200 tonight? We'll get back to the decathlon later, but men's 200 tonight.
Well, we know that since I work with the Canadians, that the Grasse strength has been the finish of the race in the 200 in particular, and his weakness has always been to come out of the blocks. And I think today he hit it good coming out of the blocks and control the race from basically start to finish, very much as Christine said. It was unfortunate that Aaron Brown, if I look at him, he comes out really well out of the turn, but he has always a problem going through the rounds up to a final and performing the final. It's like the final is his stumbling block, and specifically the last 100 meters. So that's basically my comment there. I mean, it was a fantastic race to look at, and it's a tough gig to win the 200, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Christine, any more final comments on the 200? Not yet. Okay, so Rita has comments. Rita, welcome back.
Sorry, can I say something again? Is that I keep on thinking what Peter Thompson said the other night with the 4% increase with the titanium spikes, and he mentioned that the Grasse was also running. Did you see how he kissed his spikes at the end of the race?
Yeah.
He took off his spikes. He held them up and he was kissing his spikes all the time, showing it to the camera. So obviously, I was immediately thinking on what Peter said about the 4%. And I'm not saying that's the sole reason why he won, but obviously, just like in Warholm, it must have played a role, I think. I don't know who else saw him kissing his spikes and showing it to the camera.
Might be more to do with the $12 million deal he's got with Puma.
That's my thoughts too.
Well, maybe, but that's not what Peter said. What the research showed the spikes help for. I don't know. It's just a question.
Yeah. Back to Peter.
Well, I think the major difference with Andre this time around is that he's way more fit than he was 4 years ago or 5 years ago. He's better trained, he's better conditioned, so I think that plays a huge role too. I don't know as much about spikes as Peter Thompson might know or anybody else.
Okay, so while we have Peter here, I want to talk about the men's 800 meters next, and I want to call on Peter Thompson. I want to properly introduce him this time now that he's here. So Peter is a former director of the IAAF Global Coaches Education. He's a co-founder of the USATF Coaches Education, now specializes in endurance, and is the innovator of the new interval training and introduced Biokinetics and the fourth energy system. His post-collegiate athletes have set 6 world records. Welcome back, Peter, again. Just your thoughts on the 800. For me, I hate slow races. You must just have a 150-meter time trial, let him sprint, fastest guy wins. We missed David Rudisha, right? Let's admit that we missed David, right? We missed his 48 opening. But your thoughts on 800 meters? Oh, you're on mute. Hang on, Peter.
Peter.
Yeah, you're on mute.
Yeah, it's interesting you have that take, Jimson, because I've been following a lot of comments on social media where people are damning the race as a waste of time, and it should be rerun, and it's terrible. And it actually is we all know, it's a championship race, and a lot of coaches, when they go into championships, say to their athletes, everybody's going to expect you to take the lead. Whatever you do, don't take the lead. Let somebody else take the lead. And that's what seemed to happen here, is that everybody was waiting for somebody else to take the lead and coming through in 53 point. And it was great that Peter Boll took it on and kind of, as Frank would say, grasped the nettle and took the lead and led the race for a considerable part of it. And it was a shame that he was kind of caught at the end, but great that he held on for fourth. I was afraid he was going to be washed away completely at the end. But so, yeah, not a typical race. The surprises there were not really. I think Korea was many people's favorite going in. And Rotich, Wily Old Fox, hung back through most of the race and then came through right at the end with a really superb charge. And then Polish athletes, we always know they're going to be strong in the 800 meters, whether it's a male or a female athlete. They're going to be coming hard in the last 60 meters. And we had that situation there where Dobek snatched third place. So Clayton Murphy is the one who's been really hauled over the coals in social media, particularly in the US. And I don't know what was up with Clayton, whether there was something wrong, whether he felt that it's like in a lot of these races, every single athlete thinks that they can outsprint everybody else. And Clayton did everything position-wise that he would do normally to move and make his move in the final straight. But when he did that, for whatever reason, either he didn't have it or the others just had more. But it was I thought it was an interesting championship race, and it was a good championship race, and it didn't have fast times, but it's never going to have fast times coming off that that first split of 53.8.
Yeah, Gunther, your thoughts on that?
Thank you. When I saw the first lap in 53 followed by a 52, I found it actually entertaining. Looking at it, for me, the race of the races is still the London Rhodesia race. Or looking at it from a bigger perspective, if you want to run a world-class pace in 800 meter, Rhodesia's split times were relatively equal when he set up the world record in London. So going old times, Barbosa 49.48 has never produced a world record. So I'm not a friend of having a first 49.50 and then we look for the lactate acid to drop in and we have people surviving. We should remember that 800 meter is a predominant endurance event with, following the physiological concept, 60% of the performance based on general endurance. So the 53-52 split, I would have liked, not 53 was a little bit too slow, but a more equal setting between the different chapters of 200. Rhodesia for me is still the measurement for how to run a world-class, a world record 800 meter. And when you look at the split times, they were pretty equal. So you will not make a giant performance world record by having the first too fast, or in this case, the 53 first split.
Okay, Peter, your hand up, or because I want to talk about the decathlon and heptathlon day one for both events. So for this one, I want to call on both Peter Eriksson and Frank because you both have coached and oversaw the the combined events.
Jimson, before we move on there, can I just make a coaching point? One of the implications from the 800-meter men's final there.
For sure.
Frequently we have the women running the last 200. There's the fastest 200 or the second fastest 200 in the race, whereas the men tends to be much more of a fatigue model. But here in Tokyo, we have both the men's and the women's races running faster in the second lap. And I think this is something that the coaches are going to have to kind of consider in the preparation of their athletes, their male athletes in particular. So I just wanted to make that point.
No, thank you. No, I always tell my athletes, make sure you qualify. I mean, that's no showboating, no slowing down. You know the rules, top 3 and 2 fastest, whatever it is. When it comes to these races, you know where your relay markers are. It's all a coach's fault and coach's responsibility. So good point there, Peter. Thank you. So going back to the combined event. So obviously Canada is leading 1 and 3 in the men's decathlon. So Peter, do you have any insights on what's going on with the decathlon today, Team Canada?
No, not necessarily any details about it. I mean, when you see Damien open in 10-12, whatever he had in the 100, and then do 8:20 in the long jump, it's going to be tougher competition. In my mind, the Australian guy who is doing a phenomenal competition is going to be the competition for him in the end of the day. The problem he's having is some of the throws and then pole vault. And the younger guy, Canadian, he is generally good, but he seems to have an injury which showed in the high jump. So I don't know how that's going to end up on day 2. But I'll leave all of this to Frank, because I know Frank is the guy for Montevideo. So. Well,
he is the guy, but we also have 2 guests tomorrow. We have Kelly Sotherton tomorrow, as well as Laura Turner-Aline coming. But Frank, you're here today. Your thoughts on today's combined events?
Yeah, okay. Well, actually, this is the serious athletics, guys. You know, a lot of these other things, you know, we can talk about, but this is the serious stuff, guys. You know, these are the serious athletes out there. Let's take on have a look at the women first, because this is wide open. Veta, who I guess a lot of people would not have put her to be leading the field at the end of the first day. She's up there with 3,968 points. Wits from Belgium. Who would have thought the younger one would be overtaking the established athlete at 3,941, and Tiam at 3,921. Kuntz, United States, 3,870. So we've actually got only 102 points separating the first 4 athletes. If you go to the first 5, and we've got, I'm trying to pronounce this lady's name, Ahuwanyu from Benin, 3,867. There's only 109 points covering the first 5. Now compare that with the decathlon at the moment. Out there in front is Warner, and I'll go through some of the detail in a second or two. 4,722. Big surprise, and my goodness, is he having a good competition, is Maloney from Australia, 4,641. Lepage, second Canadian, 4,529. And just as Peter says, we could very well have a reversal of order before the end of the day in all of this. Bastian from the United States, 4,369. And Maya, really out of sorts at the moment, as everybody's seen, 4,340. So we've actually got the best part of 400 points between the first 5 there. So 109 points between the first 5 and in heptathlon, 400. So it's less open. And I think the big fight is going to be between the 3 that we've mentioned at the top end there, Warner, Maloney, and Lepage. But how did people get there? Well, first of all, very sad story about Catherine Johnson Thompson. She really started pretty well. 13:27, a pretty quick opener for her hurdles. Season's best at 186 in the high jump. And Sean will have been delighted to see a pretty good performance, or at least a better performance in her shot put at 13:31. After that, the truth came out. She'd been carrying an injury for some time. And a lot of people were surprised that the injury was on the right calf when the original injury was on the Achilles. Well, have a chat with any physio, any coach with experience in this stuff, and any doctor, and they'll tell you the biggest problem is not the major injury that you're trying to get over, it's the compensations that have been taking place in the other limb. Liz McColgan, I remember having Achilles trouble. What took her out eventually on the left foot, what took her out eventually was hamstring trouble on her right leg. So this was no big surprise. And I was kind of, well, yeah, I was kind of surprised myself that she was allowed to compete in the first place, because it was one thing was pretty sure, she was going to have to drop out at some point.
Sean, you have comments on that?
Mute, Sean.
You're on mute. Hang on, you're mute.
Sorry, she had a serious injury over the winter with a Achilles partial rupture, and chose to try to recover from that, and actually did a pretty good job of doing that. I was actually surprised at how well she was doing today. But as you said, it was the reaction in the high jump. She jammed her foot, and that was what caused the right calf problem, and carried that through. And they were worried about whether it was going to stand up in the 200, and clearly it didn't. But I was surprised that she only got selected having proved fitness fairly late on with a high jump 184 and stuff. So, but she got better in the training camp. So I was pleased to see that she was getting better, and I was pleased with her performances. They were better than I expected based on what we'd seen before she got out here. And but yeah, that's a lot of pressure on that Achilles though, and therefore the other leg.
And the compensation. You're dead right, Sean. And I think I was sharing with Christine before we got onto the call. Again, okay, I'm a dinosaur on these things, but there are certain things you'll learn through experience over a while. And one thing is, if your athlete is still trying to correct form or get back into form within 6 weeks of a major championships, in my opinion, they shouldn't be there, because it never, ever works out. It never works out. I can take you to any sport and you'll see that. Because there's a bit of arrogance in this. You know when you get into that 6 week cycle into the major championship that you are not going to be 100%. You know that. The doctors know that. The coaches know that. So how about this? You think you can go and take on the best in the world when you're not 100%. And I just think it's being unfair to yourself. And you're right, Sean. A lot of pressure on her, particularly from the media and the public. This was the nation's expectations and so on. And so the athlete feels obliged. But maybe that's for another conversation. But then very quickly coming to what was happening out there, it was interesting that Veta was not the best of the athletes in any single event, but she was second best in 3. So that put her up there. Very interesting to see Vit's performances. Pretty sharp 100 meters hurdles at 13:17, at 183 in the high jump, and a personal best in 14:33 in the shot. Pretty tasty also in the 200 meters, giving the fastest time at 23:70. In third place at the moment, we have somebody who I guess was the favorites for the title. It's interesting that she's only had one sort of leading performance throughout the whole competition, and that was in the high jump at 1:92. I have to say, I did get the feeling that she's not at her best at the moment. So we'll see what happens in the second day. But I'm pretty sure Charles Van Comedy is pretty happy with life at the moment, because I think Veta could very well be heading for another Dutch gold. Looking at the men's event, well, Peter's just covered a couple of points there. I mean, what a start for Warner. 10:12 in 100 meters. I mean, come on, guys. That sort of stuff can sometimes make the semi-final and the sprint event, the straight sprint event. 8:24 for the Olympic, the best performance in a long jump in any Olympic Games. And then he backed that up with 14:18. Not such a tasty high jump at 2 meters too, but he finished top of the pile there at 4:7:22. But the real revelation in all of this was this young guy from Australia. I mean, he kicked off with a personal best. I mean, this to me is the good stuff. If you remember Jessica Ennis, in Daegu, okay, she had a problem there because of the javelin, but in Daegu, in the heptathlon, she delivered 4 lifetime bests in the course of 2 days. That takes a bit of good going, folks. And for this young lad, Maloney, has come out to deliver 10:34 for a PB in his 100. and a 2:11 high jump, which is pretty rich returns for in that particular event, and then finish up with a 46.29 400 meters. He thoroughly deserves that 4641. And in third place at the moment, we've got Lepage. Again, always fantastic for an athlete to produce a personal best, even if it's in the shot put at 15:31. But when I say even, the problem with the throws, as many of you will know, is they're not particularly generous when it comes to points. It's the jumps and the sprints that get you there. So it's going to be close, folks. And I think it's going to be between these three and the men, but it's still a bit open in the women.
Thanks, Frank, for the detailed synopsis. Michael Bennett, you have your hand up. Is this with the combined events? We're still on combined events before we move on to another topic. No?
So one of the things I was going to mention with the combined event is that there is definitely, with an athlete of the caliber of Thompson, having an athlete of that caliber, you oftentimes have to really look at where they're at in the development, where they're in their training. When they are doing the recovery with physical therapy and things like that, you have to make a lot of decisions where they are. Obviously, between her and her coaches, they thought that she was ready enough to be able to compete at the Olympics, but she may not have been fully there to compete at her best, but they thought she was ready enough to compete. I've had athletes that have had major hamstring injuries, tendon injuries, and we've had physicians, physical therapists, and we've had to make some decisions. They want to go to nationals, they want to go to a world championships, and they have to make a decision. Do they feel they're ready enough to compete? And it's always a very challenging situation, so you have to make that decision. Also, one other thing I was going to mention too, with Warner from Canada, there's always a big deal when you have a real good sprinter and a really good jumper. They're always going to do very well in decathlon, but you have to have the other events have to be able to carry on with the throws and with some of the vertical jumps like the pole vault and a high jump to really carry over. And also from my experience, I think it is a little lost, especially at the elite level, with the athletes not working as much on the last events, both the 800 meters and the 1500 meters. So if one of those athletes, like a Warner, comes around and does pretty well in 1500, then you may see sometimes its performances be even higher.
Michael, good point. So I want to continue on from last night's talk about the whole transgender and fairness issue at the end.
Jimson, I'm sorry, Jimson, but I got a really good question, I think, to ask Frank and Sean, which I think is an important coaching question, is that as I watched KJT in the 200 meters in the heptathlon, and when I saw her pull up, I immediately thought, as a coach, would I have suggested to her that she consider running in traditional spikes rather than the carbon-plated Nike Dragonflies? Because we know that the Nike Dragonflies put a greater strain on the calf unit and Achilles. And as a coach, would we said, okay, maybe consider wearing a traditional shoe, because you sprinted very, very fast in a traditional shoe in the past, and we can't change the track surface, but we can certainly change what's under your foot.
I think, as Frank pointed out, the injury that stopped her running was not the Achilles. So it was the calf.
But it was for the calf unit. It doesn't matter whether it's compensatory. So, you're going to get that transfer.
Oh, and with the new shoe rules, you have to declare what shoes you're going to wear now, which is kind of a strange thing in advance. But,
Sean, just to pick up on that, Peter, it gave her no problem in the 100 hurdles.
Right, but it was something.
So why would you change that?
Well, she'd done the high jump, and she might have been aware of a change or not. I don't know. I wasn't speaking with her.
The issue came from the high jump. The issue came from the high jump. She limped off after the high jump. And I spoke to Aston Moore, who is her point of contact alongside Bertrand, the coach. And Aston was worried about the 200 because of the calf problem from the high jump more than the Achilles. She'd sprinted and she'd been sprinting fine and was doing okay and did a test before she came out here to prove fitness. So that the Achilles, while it's in the back of her mind and was causing some issues in terms of confidence, that I think the hurdles did show that she was actually in pretty good shape. She came off that smiling because that was a good run for her, very good run. So I was, and then to do 186 in the high jump again is she was doing well. She might not have been 100%. She was still good enough to medal, and that was coming into this what she was thinking about. So I think
it is a good question, Peter, and it's a judgment call, isn't it? I'd have to say, if I'd been in that position, I would have just looked at the athlete in the eye and say, "What do you think?"
And I think, Frank, the other thing is that these shoes are so new that people don't know what the issues are with them. The scientists may, and Peter may be much closer to the Nike people, and he knows the dragonflies and what they've been developing. But there are, as Christine alluded to yesterday, there are injuries that are coming out, and they now seem to be specific injuries relating to the shoes that our physios are now picking up on, the coaches are now picking up on, people that are trying these shoes out. They're causing problems because it shifts the emphasis to another point in the mechanics, another point in the body, and that is something that probably that athlete hasn't worked hard enough to build up resistance to, and that's why we're getting a lot of injuries. There was an awful lot of injuries coming up. People in the last, Adam Jamili got injured in his last sprint before going out on the track. Had a couple of others that have done the same thing. There's last minute injuries and things that the spikes seem to be putting pressure in places that are not really known about. And also there's a variation in the spike plates. Everyone thinks that they want the nice new spike plates, but some of those spike plates have been designed for certain people. Carsten Warholm, has had special design plates. If somebody else runs in them, are they going to be the same properties that they're looking for? And again, that causes issues. So there's a long-term problem.
Yeah, but coming back to the fact that the new shoes, and clearly there's a potential discussion here that we'd need a bit of scientific background to come to conclusions on. However, am I to believe, because those of you are at the sharp end at the moment, am I to believe that athletes are only wearing these very recently? Because if they are, why are you going straight into the most important events of your life when you haven't really properly tested the kit?
Because they don't want to be seen to be at a disadvantage. They think they're at a disadvantage. It started with the distance shoes, and everyone was wearing the distance shoes. And the difference is, Frank, that the forces involved in sprinting and in spikes and getting up on the toes are far, far greater than somebody running a marathon. But that
Sean, I get that, but I get that. But why would you not have quite a few months of work on these things before you ever get in there? And if people are suddenly switching at the last minute, well, I mean, you all know it yourselves. I mean, in the past, a new piece of equipment or whatever, you better make sure you've tried it out a few times so your body can take it and you understand it before you go out and deliver it in the competitive arena.
Mm-hmm. So we got two hands up here, Gunther and Michael. Gunther, you want to go first? Get your hand up.
Thank you. I would like to come back. It was mentioned we can change the shoes, but we cannot change the surface. I would like to disagree slightly. We all agree that we have an increased amount of injuries and that both components definitely contribute. To protect the athletes from structural overload, we have regulations which stipulate that the force reduction should be 35%, which was definitely the case when this track we are competing on was finished. But this was 1 year ago. And this type of material we are competing on is not especially famous for getting or keeping the force reduction when it's aging and exposed to sun over 1 year. So I would think about that the actual force reduction should have been remeasured. I'm not aware that this was done because being on that track, it was pretty hard. And I would dare to question if we still have the minimum force reduction of 35%.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to hang on. I need to introduce one more panelist here. Let's hold on to the shoe technologies for a bit, Michael. And I see your comments, but we have another guest here, Dr. Nicola Williams, and she is a research scientist specializing in human biology. She has held a number of senior scientific positions within the pharmaceutical industry, and she is now dedicated full-time role as a campaign director and public spokesperson for Fair Play for Women. So this is going on from yesterday's talk about the transgender fairness thing. Nicola, welcome. I think you're here, your camera on.
Yep, hello.
Hi there. So thank you for joining tonight. I know you made a special effort to join in, and yesterday's talk towards the end got really heated about these whole issues. So perhaps maybe give your thoughts about the whole issue, yesterday's silver medalist in the women's 200 and other issues. Can you give us some background?
Sure. Yeah. So my main area is around transgender inclusion and how that may impact fairness in women's competition. But of course, there are a fair few overlaps there with the considerations around DSD and intersex athletes as well. So I think that's why Frank wanted me to come along today, with my experience around transgender athletes, I think I can have some interesting things to say, hopefully, about DSD as well. Just for context, so yeah, I'm not a coach. I'm a scientist and a campaigner, but I was involved in World Athletics transgender meeting in 2019, where they discussed what the level should be for testosterone in transgender athletes. So I've been in this debate for a while now. So I think what I'd probably say in terms of DSD and transgender athletes, the issue there is the idea is that if you reduce testosterone in a DSD athlete or a transgender male athlete, then that would eliminate any of the testosterone advantage that person had growing up and during training. The science that has been published in the last couple of years is really moving away from that idea to show that in a transgender athlete who was born male, went through a male puberty, if they reduce their testosterone in adulthood, that does not reverse the benefits of male puberty. Some of the characteristics will improve, but some don't. So muscle strength, for example, is barely touched by reducing testosterone in adulthood. And so I think some of those similar those ideas can also be transferred across to DSD athletes as well. So, I mean, I wasn't there yesterday, so I don't know what discussion you had about the DSD athletes, but I think it's sometimes useful to just put the facts out on the table for this. So a disorder of sexual development, there are hundreds of different types. So it's not one particular type of biology. But World Athletics has a rule for a particular chromosomal configuration, and that is the one that Caster Semenya has and also shares with the athletes that you were talking about yesterday. And Caster Semenya and those athletes, the rule applies to them, and it means that they can't compete in certain categories unless they reduce their testosterone. And these athletes have a chromosomal configuration which is male. They have an XY chromosome, but they have a particular disorder in another gene, which meant that when they were born, their genitals were ambiguous. So these particular athletes were considered to be girls when they grew up. And it wasn't until puberty that their testes that were internalized, so they do have testes like males, but they're internal. Those testes would begin to generate testosterone, and so they'd go through a male puberty, and that's why these athletes are so good, and why we see them on the podium in these particular events. And that's why World Athletics had to put some rules in place, because there's an unfairness there. So there's a similarity there with the transgender athletes, in that we've got people who have been through a male puberty wanting to compete in female competitions. And there have been rules put in place to try to limit that. Although I would say that the rules that are in place, which rely on reducing testosterone in adulthood, aren't actually sufficient. They're not good enough, because you can't actually reverse the benefits. So I think there's a really serious and difficult conversation to be had about what do we do with athletes that have that advantage, and do they belong in the category that has been restricted for people who haven't been through a male puberty, essentially, because that's what women's sport is. So that's I'll stop there in case there's any questions, but that was the context of how testosterone impacts some of the thinking around this.
Thank you, Nicola. Anybody want to chime in on that?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
I do have one question. In your experience, what have you seen being the actual major benefit from a performance standpoint? As in, has there been any research done that actually gives a definitive standpoint as far as what are the athletes actually doing differently? Because from what I've seen with the athletes that are maybe considered intersex, that they may be, some of them may be, at least the ones we see in the sports on a different level, some of them are some of the best in the world as far as in the women's events. But I wouldn't think Katsumania or the woman from the 200-meter dash that got silver would be able to transfer over to the male events and be able to do well and be successful regardless of how hard they trained. So do you have any real data related to that to see what it really is? Because neither of those women have gotten close to the world record. Yes, they've done really well, but Katsumania is still a ways away from breaking the 800-meter world record when she was competing.
Yeah. So there have not been any studies in athletes, really, because you have to actually, I think what's happened, Caster Semenya obviously had to reduce her testosterone a few years ago, and her performance did drop. So that's some evidence that testosterone had played a role in her performance. But of course, there were so many confounding factors in that. It's not a clean experiment, because of course she's been through quite a major issue there, and her performance could have dropped off. So there's no really good science that says for sure what the testosterone does. But actually, this is where it's interesting for the transgender athletes, or transgender people in general who have transitioned and do that by reducing testosterone. And what we can see, there have been some studies that follow and track transgender athletes, sorry, not athletes, just ordinary transgender people during a transition. And people have measured things like muscle strength, oxygen, hemoglobin content, things like that. So some things are reduced, but things like muscles aren't. So people are having, you would have to project into how that might impact performance. So we haven't done the studies yet that actually show athletes running slower, for example, or running the same. So there is a real lack of science here, which makes this very difficult. But I think what's clear is that the idea that reducing testosterone later in life can suddenly fully reverse all of the benefits that someone had during puberty, you know, it is really, it's a very flawed concept to think that would work. But one last thing just to throw in about DSDs is Caster Semenya, of course, didn't go through a full male puberty because she's, you know, her testes weren't necessarily pumping out the same amount of testosterone as full adult males. So it's very difficult with DSDs because actually Caster is almost a problem for her in any category because she's not really as good as the males, but she's better than the females. So it's a really difficult one for DSDs. It's clearer with transgender athletes because transgender athletes are fully male in terms of their sex, who then reduce their testosterone and want to compete in female sports. So a lot more science needs to be done, really. But that's the state of play, really. So I haven't got a perfect answer for you there, but studies are being done at the moment trying to track transgender athletes, but it will be years before we have an absolute full picture.
Definitely. Peter Eriksson, last topic on this before we move on to another event.
Thanks for that. It's really good information. I just wonder, why do you think it is that the elite athletes, female, who talks a lot about this, but they don't speak up publicly about it? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one of the, I mean, this is a really controversial area. We all know that, you know, and I mean, I've spoken to quite a few athletes who say to me that they can't afford to get involved in this fight, in this discussion, because they'd be worried that they wouldn't get selected, or it might impact their position in a team, different things like that. And I certainly know examples in cycling where women have said to me that they've been told by their sponsors, do not speak about this issue. And so they're silenced, basically. And so that's why what we're seeing is actually it's the retired athletes that speak out on this. Now, Martina Navratilova, Sharon Davis, Tanni Gray Thompson, or, you know, other people like that who have enough experience, but then have enough scope to be able to talk about this because they haven't got to defend their active career. But it makes it really difficult for the issue to be talked about because women are concerned, clearly, but it's dangerous for them to speak out, which is why campaign groups are involved.
Yeah, no, definitely. Peter, last thing, I want to move on to last
The comment is, I read a Swedish paper that the Olympic Committee said that any comments or anybody signing on to about the transgender or DSD issue is going to be considered a hate subject, and so therefore they basically silence everybody up on the subject matter as well.
Yeah, and that makes it difficult. This is why people, it's good to come to somewhere like this and just talk about some of the science, because otherwise people don't hear about it, because you won't just hear about it on the media because nobody really wants to talk about it. Very few people will even admit that Caster Semenya has an XY chromosome, for example, and has internal testes. But I only tell you this so that you can understand why there might be a problem and why there might be a fairness issue, because you do really need to know that.
Yeah. Okay. We got 10 minutes left. I want to cover the last three events. We're not finals, but I still want to cover them quickly. Christine, if I can get you on the women's 400 meter semifinals, all 8 finalists or semifinalists who advanced ran sub 50 seconds. Any thoughts on that, women's 400, Christine?
Yeah, it's quite interesting because at the Worlds in Doha, it was you had to run 49 and mid 49 to low 49s to qualify for the final. And here you're finding it again. However, what is different is the makeup of the final. Now, you've got the Jamaicans, you've got 2 Jamaicans, 1 Dominican, 1 Cuban, 2 USA, and 1 UK. In Doha, we had 2 Europeans. So I'm not sure if as Europeans, we haven't, we've regressed in our ability to produce high caliber 400 meter runners. Remember, Jodie's only been doing the 400 meters for the last 6 months. So I'm quite excited, but I was really concerned when I saw Shawnee Miller-Weibo. She said that she's been battling injuries throughout the whole of this year, like little niggles here and there. And that, like when we spoke earlier, Frank, I was very mindful of, she's had a hamstring issue and she's had a knee issue. However, she still performed 49.60. You look at the experience of the people in the final, it's the same similar people in the final in Doha to who were in the final in Tokyo. However, I think the race is going to be run differently because in Doha, obviously, we had Sawa, who went off extremely fast. There's nobody, I don't think, in this women's final that can run the speed that Sawa went at. And also, Muir isn't in the shape that she was in Doha. So I'm not sure on Muir's strength and whether she's actually done enough work to win this race. I'm not saying she can't win it, but I'm saying it's going to be very difficult. And I think you're going to have to look at McLeod, Paulina, the Dominican, and McPherson, because she's very experienced. But I do think that Jodie Williams, she's quite a patient runner, and she builds through each 100 meters. And that seems to be the way to run the 400 meters now, because in the past it's been like everybody's gone out for 200 meters. So you've had Alison Felix, you've had Muir who can run 21 or low 22. So they can go at 23 flat and then still come home because their speed reserves are far greater. But I think it's going to be a different way of running the 400s. And I think as coaches, we need to really look at how the 400 meter is changing and how, you know, we change the different energy systems. I think it's going to be very crucial in this race as to who's going to win.
Frank, quick thoughts on that before
just very quick, just to pick up on what you said there, Christine. It's not just women's 400 meters in Europe that's gone backwards. The men's 400 meters has gone backwards too, and I just find that extraordinary. Can you throw any light on this for us?
I think because Sawa came out. Remember in Doha we saw 48.1, 16.18. Maybe girls realized that they couldn't compete with that on that level. I mean, Muir ran 48 and she only got the silver medal. So Sawa, I think that put a lot of people off doing 400s. And if you look at the girls, Christine from the 200 meters, the silver medalist, and her compatriot, they both ran 48 this year. And if you watch the race, I think it's really made people feel like because as soon as I saw 48, I said, right, how am I going to have to change my training in order for them to compete at that level? And maybe we're just going through a transitional phase when we've got to change the way we train, maybe the energy, emphasize more on the speed endurance, special speed endurance, rather than just on pure speed, because that's the way the 400 is going. There's many issues and different people run it in different ways. And you can't say that one way is better than the other because it changes depending on who's at the top. So when Chrissy O was running, everybody would go out hard and Chrissy O would pick them up at the end. So everybody changed the way they trained. Like Alison Felix changed the way she trained. Sanya Richards changed the way she trained and the way she raced because of the way Chrissy O ran. And so they changed that, but now we're going to have to change it back or come into a middle ground and think about, you know, what suits that particular athlete, because the way Jodie runs suits her. Jodie couldn't go out as hard as maybe a Muir because she hasn't got the foot speed that Muir has, but she can build, and her speed endurance base is quite high, and she's worked on that consistently for the last 2 years.
Okay, let's move on to the second last event, the 110 meter hurdles for men. Rita, if you're willing to speak again. 3 semifinals. Should we just give Grant Holloway the medal now?
Yeah, I'll be quick because it was quick. I must say that, I mean, if we look at the semifinal, we have 2 Americans, 2 Jamaicans, and 2 French, and 2 others, obviously 1 UK guy running. I must say that from the heats, that Holloway from the US is very impressive. But Allen, also from the US, I thought he was the lightest on his feet. He was very, very quick. He was the same heat as Manga. And I think if Manga gets his first 3 or 4 steps out of the block, not falling out of the blocks and dragging his feet, I think he is going to run a good race. The thing is with the final, it's like, I think all hurdles coaches in the 110 tells you, the athletes, get to the first hurdle first and don't hit hurdles. And in the final, when it comes tomorrow, it's going to be who is going to hit the hurdles or who is going to have. If I look at Alan today, he looked lighter, although he didn't run as fast as Holloway, just a little bit slower, 0.1. I must say he was light on his feet. He was like lightning over those hurdles. Holloway is good, but Alan, I like his pose, I like his lightness and everything. And again, it is nice to see the French coming back in the 110 hurdles from the days of Guy Drew. Their technique always superior. And I mean, I'm sure you all know about that under 18 guy ran on the lower hurdles 12:87 or 92, something like that. So there's definitely something interest in the 110 hurdles in France again. So I don't know, my favorites maybe Levan, maybe there, but I don't know. I think thing goes well, maybe Alan can pip Holloway. That will be a big upset, and Manga may be in it as well. Levi may be very close as well, but that's my take on it. But again, whoever's going to get the smooth race with the stress.
Yeah, nothing is guaranteed. Just
Thank you.
ask Perdita Felician or Lolo Jones. Nothing's guaranteed in the Olympic final. So
Nothing.
nothing. So okay, last event, 1,500 meters, women's. Maybe Peter Thompson can give us some quick insight. Should I start engraving Hassan's name on her gold medal and give it to her, or what's going to happen? Peter, you're on mute. Peter, you're on mute.
Got you. Thank you. Actually, that's what a lot of my friends have been trying to do for a long time. Keep me on mute. But no, I don't think it's a gimme for Sifan by any means. I think that Faith Kipyegon is rounding into really excellent shape. Just very briefly, 2 heats. The first heat went out in about 63.2829. And then the second heat, for some reason, knowing there's, again, fastest qualifiers involved, went out in 65 and almost 2:12. And so, you know, it was almost always going to be the case that the fastest qualifiers, non-automatic qualifiers, were going to come from the first heat. And again, that's something for coaches to consider, is that if you've got an athlete in the second heat, and you know they can challenge to make the final if it's an even pace. But if everybody in the race thinks they're the best sprinter, then there's going to be a lot of athletes getting a rude awakening. So the final looks really, really strong. A lot of athletes in there. I think obviously I've got to say that Laura Muir for me is somebody who I think hopefully will medal on the world stage outdoors in Tokyo. I think she's got the ability to do that given her recent PB at 800. Jessica Hull, Oceania record. Tanaka, national record. Maki, a national record for Czechoslovakia. National record for Quivisto for Finland, and she's had a superb game so far. She didn't make the final 1,500, but she's run very, very well in the 8 and 15, and is one for the future potentially. And then I must restore attention quickly to Corianne McGee, who qualified for the final having fallen during the race. And if you're looking at the men's results, you'll see that there are 2 athletes there, Jesus Gomez in the 1,500 meters, who fell and was put through to the final, and also Marcin Lewandowski fell and was put through to the final. And I'm not sure that they were necessarily fouled. I mean, I haven't looked through that again, but perhaps this is a new technique of getting through to the final, is have your athlete fall. Anyway, somewhat facetious comment to finish off with. I think it's a really exciting 1,500 coming up in prospect there. And I think it's open. I think Sifan, she looks a little bit haggard on the start lines and a little bit under the pressures of the weight of what she's going to do. But if anybody can do it, then certainly she can.
Yeah, definitely. Gunther, maybe 30 seconds on your comments on what Peter said, because we're about to close off.
I think Hassan Kipchigon will be the duel to watch. I don't think that, sorry for my British friends, that Muir or anybody will be able to interfere on their level, and I would even expect a really fast race in spite of the bad conditions. So we may have even a 350.7, 350.07 in that level, because Hassan will at all costs try to make this medal, but Kipchigon is also in excellent shape. So I look forward to see this two going to maybe close to world record.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so before we close off with Frank, Les Romantic was a late joiner. Les, do you have anything to say about Team Canada, the decathlon men's before, or can you join tomorrow and we can discuss more in depth tomorrow?
Well, at this point, I think looking very good for us. And, you know, obviously, I've worked with Damien many years ago. So I think at this point, he should be able to win it. But also not surprised, but impressed by Pierce LePage, because he's also doing extremely well. And I'm really disappointed on Kevin Meyer. Not that I'm directly disappointed, but I thought he was better prepared for it. And women's heptathlon is another interesting position. Obviously, Katina Johnson-Thompson stepped away, it looks like that way. And then it opens up for TM, although nothing is guaranteed in combined events or any events as a matter of fact. But I'm looking forward to the finish of both of them.
Well, if you can join tomorrow, we also have Kelly Salterton and Laura Turner-Aline joining us as well. So it should be a good discussion with the three of you and Frank as well. Okay, on that note,
the coaching is a day too far for me to get away.
Yeah, I know it's tough, but it should be fun. So on that note, we're a bit over. Frank, maybe some final thoughts. We've covered all the events. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. Frank, some final closing thoughts?
Well, not thoughts about what we've done, because I think this has been. I think we've gone pretty deep tonight in quite a few of these disciplines, and we've managed to touch once again on this very delicate issue of transgender and the testosterone situation. I still maintain that the three issues have got to be addressed: how it's managed, stick to the rules, but for goodness sake, can we have some 100% clarity on where this is all going? But finally, Jimson, once again, great job, mate. Wonderful evening. You handle this like a true pro. Giacomo, great job again for putting this all together. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Gunther, for tuning in from the other side of the world and giving up some of your beauty sleep. I'm not saying that either of you need beauty sleep, but you know, it might help a little bit further down the line. To everybody else, panelists, thank you very much indeed. Superb job again tonight. And for all of you joining in, tell your friends. Let's have even more for the rest of the week. Over to you, James.
Yeah, thank you again. I want to again thank you all the panelists. You know, Sean, Gunther, Christine, Rita, Peter, Eriksson, Anders for joining, Dr. Nicola Williams, Peter Thompson, and I'm sure I forgot somebody else. But again, same time tomorrow, 6 p.m. UK time. Share the link with your friends and bring your questions. And I hope to see you all tomorrow. Tomorrow, again, we have two special guests, so it should be a good session tomorrow. Thank you all, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job. Well done, everybody.